Happy holidays, everybody. Thanks for hanging out for a little bit. I always appreciate you watching. I'm Orlando Ruiz Jr. Welcome to another classic movie review. I haven't been able to upload anything in a while. I've been very busy with, the holidays. Recently we had Thanksgiving and now we're getting into the Christmas season. So I've been very busy doing the dad thing, getting the tree with the family and putting up the Christmas lights on the house and all that fun stuff. But now it's time for me to get into some movie talk, and I am talking about 1969's On Her Majesty's Secret Service, the sixth James Bond film based on the ninth Ian Fleming James Bond novel that came out in 1963. This was directed by Peter Hunt, who was an editor on the 5 previous 007 films, starting with Dr. No. And this is the one where this was the first time that somebody other than Sean Connery would play the part of James Bond. Sean Connery retiring from the role after You Only Live Twice, which came out a couple years before this. And so they were trying to find the perfect Bond, and they settled on a guy who was an Australian model, George Lazenby, who was supposed to play the part more than once, but ultimately decided, because he felt like Bond wasn't going to survive into the 1970s and kind of fade out, he figured he would just play the part only once. And so, yeah, only was in one Bond movie, but this is a very significant and very important Bond film. By the time this sixth entry in the series came along, the character of Bond was really starting to become synonymous with the gadgets that he would come to use to get out of certain sticky situations. But with this one having a more back to basics approach, they kind of strip Bond of the gadgets in this one. He uses a couple of them, but for the most part he's surviving mostly on his wits and using his physicality, and you see some really great fight scenes in this one. This film being the first time that a different actor other than Sean Connery plays the part of 007, it's very fitting in the way they introduce Bond with teasing the reveal of close-ups of his hands when he's driving and the viewpoint of the windshield when he's driving, where you just see the back of his head, and we see a little close-up of like from the mouth down and stuff. And it's very, very cool how it's edited too with the music. When it comes to the fight scenes or the chase scenes or the action scenes in general, the editing in this movie is very experimental but very ahead of its time. For a 1969 film, there is some great action in this film that really holds up beautifully. You can tell when you watch the film that there are things in this movie that are being done that became the norm later on in action cinema during the 70s, 80s, and even the 90s, with the kind of techniques that they still use today. After Bond finishes beating up on these bad guys in the beginning of the film, after trying to rescue that woman that he thought was in trouble, she gets away from him, and there's a little break of the fourth wall for the first time, maybe the only time in the series, where Bond looks directly at the audience and says, "This never happened to the other fella," which is a little weird if you're a Bond fan, because usually Bond doesn't do that. But because it's a first time that a different actor other than the first Bond ever, Sean Connery, plays the part, it's kind of fitting and a nice little joke, which I can see being kind of divisive among hardcore Bond fans. With each movie, you see him bed down 2 or 3, sometimes 4 women. And in this one, it's kind of the same case. They kind of stay true to that part of the character of Bond. However, he falls in love in this one, and that is an aspect of this film that separates it from other films, because in this one, it really kind of raises the stakes for Bond. There are moments where Tracy really shows off her resourcefulness, her abilities as a skier or a getaway driver, which really make an impression on Bond. There are moments where she saves his life, and that's kind of the ultimate clincher, I think, for Bond. Tracy ends up being kind of a badass, and by the third act of the film, Bond really comes to care for her character, so much in fact that as an audience member that really roots for Bond, you come to care for the character of Tracy as well. Playing the main villain of the film, Ernst Stavro Blofeld, who was the big head of Spectre in the previous films, previously played by the great Donald Pleasance, you got Telly Savalas. Telly Savalas was great in Birdman of Alcatraz. He was also great in The Dirty Dozen. He made a great TV cop in TV's Kojak, but he was also a great Bond villain as the character of Blofeld. One of the more memorable Blofelds of the series. Like the character of Bond, this Blofeld has a lot of taste and style, but unlike other bad guys in the series that would just stay at home and let all the henchmen do all the work, this Blofeld joins in on the chase and actually goes on ski chases, chasing after Bond, and gets in a bobsled. There's an awesome avalanche scene. There is a scene where Bond fights another guy in a room where there's a bunch of bells and they're hitting the bells, and it's very noisy and kind of loud type of fight, very messy fight, but a lot of fun. You have a scene where there is a chase in an ice rink where there's cars going around in like this racing on ice. There are a lot of fun ski jumps where you see stuntmen catching air, and you see at one point Lazenby's Bond on one ski, and it's very cool to see. You also see a very cool fight scene at the edge of a snowy cliff that is a lot of fun and very well executed. You also see at one point during a chase a guy fall into what looks like this machine that is paving like ditches, making ditches in the snow, and it's like crumbling rocks and snow, and this guy falls into it, one of the henchmen, and all kinds of blood and guts start spewing out. Some great action, a terrific villain, beautiful women, spectacular stunts, amazing cinematography, and excellent music score, not to mention some great use of actual real locations, some exotic locations, make this one of the all-time great entries in the Bond series. However, that being said, even the best Bond films sometimes are not without their mixed aspects. When it comes to George Lazenby's portrayal of Bond, there are definitely some things that I do appreciate, and there are some things that I think could have been done better. As an actor, he wasn't the strongest actor, and that's really the biggest weak point of the film. He does put in a serviceable performance as Bond and convincing enough as the character, but there are things in there that take away from the overall experience. For example, there's one sequence where Bond goes on his mission and he puts on a phony voice, and for this part of the film another actor does the voice for Lazenby, and it is a bit jarring when you notice it at first. Like his predecessor Sean Connery in the fight scenes, George Lazenby comes off very believable and convincing when he's taking down bad guys, and the choreography in this film feels a little bit more gritty and realistic as opposed to the previous films. They feel a little bit more violent. Also, like Connery, Lazenby is also very good in the film's love scenes, particularly in the scenes he has with his main co-star, because I'm not sure if had Connery played this part, how the chemistry would have been between Diana Rigg and Connery, but the chemistry between Lazenby and Diana Rigg, you can feel it when you watch the movie, and it has a real impact by the time you get to the finish, and by the time the movie is over, you do feel like Lazenby has kind of settled into the part. Another weak spot in this movie for me, besides some of the lesser aspects of Lazenby's portrayal as Bond or some of the hokey parts of the villain's plot, is a sequence where Bond goes into an office to do some detective work, but he needs the help of a big gadget, and for a movie that doesn't really rely on gadgets, there's one scene where the gadget is kind of on the spot. It has the spotlight basically because it's so damn big. For me, this part of the movie just doesn't hold up all that well on rewatches. The gadget that he uses in this scene is so big and cumbersome, and it's only meant to open a safe, and also it's also some kind of a Xerox machine, which I guess in 1969 was pretty far out technology, but you know, when you watch it nowadays, it just looks kind of dumb. Ultimately, even with a few flaws, it's still one of the best Bond films and one of the best action films of the 1960s. 1969's On Her Majesty's Secret Service is a 3.5 star classic Bond film for me. If you're an action movie fan, if you're a spy fan, if you're a 007 fan, or if you're a fan of 1960s cinema in general, definitely check out 1969's On Her Majesty's Secret Service. One of the best Bond movies with one of the most memorable endings in the series. Definitely check this one out. Thank you all very much for watching this classic movie review. I always appreciate it. If you're into movies, if you're into this kind of thing, and if you're new to the channel, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications on more classic movie reviews coming your way very soon. Please don't forget to comment, share, like. It always helps out. If you're a returning viewer, thank you very much for your support and your views, and look out for the next one. Please take care of each other. Peace out. God bless and happy holidays.